Hello, my name is Tom Stiles, and this is Tom's Radio Room Show number 119. As promised, I'm going to do a review of the Grundig S350. Where's DL? 350DL. And this is the older, and I would call it the sister of the most recent Grundig S450, which I'm going to do a review later. So tonight we're going to review this radio. It was basically given to me brand new. I ordered it from Amazon by one of my subscribers. So thank you again. And here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera around so that you can get a nice close view of the radio. See if I can do that without too much trouble. Okay, we'll back up the radio a little bit so we can get it in the screen, in the picture. And I'll go back a little more. Tilt the camera a little more. I don't go too far back because then you can't make out the details. But here it is. It's fairly large. It's about 12.5 inches wide, or this dimension, and it's about 7 inches high, and about 3 inches thick. See, it's pretty thick. Okay, we'll get it back in the screen there. And it weighs, according to the spec sheet, and I don't know what this is without batteries, but I suspect it's without batteries. It weighs a little over 3 pounds. So it's pretty hefty portable. One of the things that you get by having such a large radio, portable radio, is you get this big 4-inch speaker, which really gives you good sound, really does. Compared to, let me jump over here and get my other radio, which I just did a review on a couple weeks ago, the Grundig G3, which is truly a portable radio. But after listening to this radio with this big speaker and comparing it to this radio with this little speaker, this one really sounds tinny. So it's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. It just sounds tinny compared to this radio. Now this radio also has some controls for bass and treble, so that helps too. So let's get into the review. Give you the dimensions. The tuning frequencies is its AM band, which is 530 to 17.10 kilohertz. It's FM band, FM stereo. You know what that is. And it's shortwave. And it doesn't cover what I consider, or what is considered, the full shortwave band. The full shortwave band is considered just above the AM band, so it starts at 1.8 megahertz and it goes to 30 megahertz. This covers 3 megahertz to 28 megahertz, which is where the international broadcast, shortwave broadcasts occur. So that's the bands. This button here is for selecting the bands, for selecting AM and 3 shortwave bands. Now the 3 shortwave bands are 3 megahertz to 8 megahertz, 8 megahertz to 17 megahertz, 17 megahertz to 28 megahertz. So it's not what I call continuous tune. So you can't stay on the one setting and tune from 3 megahertz to 28 megahertz. You have to switch. And that's something you just have to keep in mind. It's not a big deal, but you have to keep it in mind. The dial up here is used for, if you're in shortwave bands, it's used for selecting narrow and wide audio or RF, so that you can filter on those bands, so you can filter out adjacent broadcasts. And then over here, it will switch the radio into FM mode. This is the switch to get an FM mode, and you can select either FM mono or FM stereo. And the reason you would select FM mono is if you're using the internal speaker, which is only a single speaker, then it takes the two channels, combines them, outputs them on the single speaker. It has a earphone jack on the side, which I'll show you, and then you'd put it in stereo and you could listen to FM stereo. So that's these two switches here. This red switch up here is the power switch, and it's also used for the sleep function, for the timing, so you can set it to for say 30 or 60 minutes and listen to the radio, and the radio will shut off by itself or go to sleep. So that's what the main power button's right there. The nice thing about having this big chassis is, and I'll turn it a little bit so you can get less reflections, is this big display. And let's turn it on. And you can see it's backlit, and it's a bluish backlit. And there's when you first turn on, the backlight comes on for about 10 seconds and then automatically shut off. This button here is to turn the backlight back on, and it will stay on for 10 seconds and then go off again, as you just saw, or maybe a little less than 10 seconds. Or you can push and hold, and it will flicker, and now it's going to stay on until you turn the radio off. So that's that button over there. These buttons here, these four little buttons, are for setting the alarm function, so you can have it to come on at a certain time and play the radio and act as an alarm. You can, if you turn the radio off, it displays the time. Now, I have not set the time, so this is not correct. And you use a couple of these buttons to set that time. So let's turn it back on. So that's these buttons up here. I discussed these two buttons. These two are the bass and treble buttons, so you can adjust that. This is the volume button. Down here it has an RF button, so that you can control an RF amplifier that's built in. And if you're receiving a station, for instance, that's too loud and it's over-modulating and distorting the signal, you can crank this down so it really works as one person I saw said, as an attenuator, not really an amplifier, and prevent that overload. So that's a nice feature. The tuning is done by these two concentric dials. This dial here, outer or inner, what you want to call it, I guess you'd call it the inner dial. The inner dial is for slow tuning. Now, another feature, just notice that when you start tuning the radio, this backlight display comes on. That's very convenient. Now, the outer one, where I got my finger now, that's for fast tuning. And you can go through the bands really fast. Now, this is an analog receiver with a digital display. So all the tuning is analog tuning, like an old tube-type analog radio. So this part is old technology. A lot of people like that versus having a button you push to tune on a digital radio, like this radio here. This radio has actually both. It has buttons to tune and a knob for analog tuning. So you have both in this one. So that's a nice feature about this one. You can jump back and forth between the two methods of tuning, where this one is only analog tuning. Now, a little bit about this analog tuning. One thing is the dial is wobbly. And I read some reviews that said the same thing. Oh, the dial's wobbly. Maybe it's broken. Well, no, it's not broken. It's just that, again, this is the old style tuning. And it's, what I've read is it actually has the tuning string that's wrapped around and goes over to the tuning capacitors. And that's why this feels wobbly. So it's actually not wobbly, it's floating to keep that tightness on that string that goes around. So at first you think it's broken, and then you realize, no, it's not broken. It's just the way the mechanism works. And it's not really a problem. Now, one feature that this tuning knob does not have, that a lot of your radios have, both old and new, is they have an indentation where you put your finger so that you can tune like that. See, now this one doesn't have it, so my finger is slipping off. So I can't use that method. I have to put my finger on the edge and hold on to the edge, which is not a problem. I'm perfectly happy with that. That's not a problem. Okay, it has a very nice telescopic antenna. And it feels pretty rugged compared to, for instance, let me go back to this antenna. This antenna, as I had mentioned when I did the review, is kind of weak, and you got to be careful not to break it off. This one on this radio seems much more ruggedized, I'll say. So you got that, a telescopic antenna, mainly used for shortwave and FM. And then on the back, you have two connectors. This is, actually you see three, but it's really two. This is for adding a external FM antenna via a coax cable. These two little things are used to stick in a long wire antenna and ground. This is, the antenna is red and the ground is here. That's really old school for using a piece of wire for an antenna. Now, you can make yourself, although they don't sell it, you'd have to make it, an adapter that's a little short piece of wire that has the exposed ends that'll plug into here, stick in here. This is also kind of like speakers had connections, older speakers for your stereo systems had connections like this. And then you can have a PL239 coax connector soldered on the end of that, and then you come along with your cable and screw it on, and there you go. Okay, so that's the antennas. So you got really three antennas, plus there's an internal AM coil antenna for receiving AM transmissions. And it can be used also for shortwave, I believe, but this telescopic antenna would be more effective. Okay, we just passed. Okay, here is the side, and you have two switches here. One switch is used for shortwave as a filter, almost like a noise filter. So you can flick that in and out, that noise filter in and out. I'll get to that when I do the part 2 and actually look at reception performance and how effective that switch is. The next switch is a mono stereo switch for these output jacks. These are two stereo output jacks, and similar to the switch on the front, you use this switch to have these outputs be either stereo or mono. And it comes with a cover that goes on these to protect these. Okay, so I'll put that down. Down at the bottom is the regular headphones jack. for stereo listening. So you can use either this or this. And this is the one, not seeing my finger. The one down here is just a regular your stereo headphones output jack. This is what's called a line output. So the output is at a certain level, and it's not affected by the volume control. So that's used for hooking it up to your, for instance, an external amplifier, or to route it into your computer. So that's all. There's no switches or anything on this side. There's a nice carrying strap. And it's padded. It's padded, so that's nice. Now, the only other thing I wanted to mention today about the radio, as far as features, and like I say, as far as reception and tuning characteristics, I'll get into part 2 into that. Is let me turn the light on. Whoops. There. Okay, light's on. Since this is an analog tuner, and the earlier model of this, the S350DL, that they came out with in about 2003, I believe, had a problem in that since it was an analog tuner, after there was the radio warmed up and the components warmed up and they heated up, it would drift off frequency, and you'd have to retune it to get it back on frequency. And then generally the temperature would stabilize and it wouldn't drift anymore. So you had that initial drift. And that was a big complaint that was voiced by the users. So in this model, one of the things they did for enhancements is they added a lock tuning circuit, so that once you dialed in a frequency, it would lock onto it. And the effect, besides getting rid of the drift, is that when you're tuning it, it tends to not want to relinquish that frequency, so to speak. So it wants to stay on that frequency. Now watch, I'll see if I can illustrate that. So we're at just a random frequency, 4.685 megahertz. So I'll start tuning the knob. Now that one reacted pretty fast. And the reason it's probably reacting pretty fast versus what I wanted to show you is that it's not locked onto a frequency. And so I don't have a station. Let me see if I can get a station, but that's what is going to illustrate it. Let's get way up there. Well, I'm in my office, and there's lots of noise that you can hear in my office. Okay, there's a station. It has locked onto that frequency, and the way you can tell it locks on is as you're tuning, the kilohertz marking here will be flashing, and then when you stop, it'll start locking onto that frequency, and once it's locked on, it'll stop flashing. So it's locked on now. So now, if I try to tune it, you see it jump. It went from 5920 to 518. So it held on to that 520 for a while until it tuned off so far that it couldn't hold lock, and then it let go. I hope I'm explaining this so you understand. So it's locked on again, but now it's locked on it at 5.918. So if I try to tune it, it's locked. See, I'm turning the dial, and then it releases it. So that's a little disheartening, but it's something you can get used to. And let me turn the audio back down. And what you're really seeing is something that is normal in an analog radio. And like I say, the tuner in this one is analog with a digital readout. And in are on an analog radio with just a dial, not this frequency meter, you won't notice that it's jumping frequency. You just don't notice it because you have no accurate way of measuring the frequency. You're just looking at a big fat dial. But since this has a precise frequency meter measuring the frequency of the tuner and what you've dialed in, it detects very minutely those changes in the frequency. And so that when that circuit is locked on a signal, even though you're tuning it, the tuner is not changing frequency because the locking circuitry is holding on to that frequency. And then finally, when you tune it far enough away, it lets go, and you see the frequency change by several digits. See? It jumped again. So it's a little discerning, but it doesn't take much to get used to it, and you can, just jog it back and forth and dial it right in. See, it's blinking right now, and then it just locked in. So even though the frequency of this particular station might be 5.985, which is more likely, a nice round number, it stopped at 5984, and then the locking circuitry slid it over to 5985 where it should be, but it didn't show up on the display. So just something you have to get used to. Not a big deal. A digital tuner in a digital display will not do that, and I'll show you that when I review the 450, which is all digital. So that's the show for today. If you have any questions, please leave the question, a comment, or email me, which is even better, and I'll try to answer your question. Again, this is the Grundig S350DL. It's been succeeded by the S450DLX, and this one right now on Amazon costs about $60, and the 450 cost about $100. So you've got $20 to $30 difference, and they have different features. So it's a question of, do you want to spend the extra money to get those extra features that I'll show you in the 450? And then what we'll do, after I do the review of the 450, I will then take this radio, the 450, and just for grins, put in the 350 and compare the 350. Now that might be a half-hour show, but we'll see. So it'll give you some quick comparisons of the three radios, and this radio sells for $100 on Amazon. So all these are available on Amazon. Please, if you're going to purchase something from Amazon, go through my Amazon store. I'll put the link in the description, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.